Coogs House, the Houston Cougars make a decision that we probably should have known they were going to make all along.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Andrews, and whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater keen to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. If you want to join in on the conversation but don't know what to say, in the comments down below, please tell us if you've seen the movie Blade Runner, because in today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We're going to talk some about Houston hiring the Slade Runner, Slade Nagel, as the offensive coordinator. That's a nickname I just made up. We'll see if we run with it or not. We might run with it, actually. It's kind of sick. We got some signing day stuff to talk about as well. Signing day has actually gone remarkably well, certainly better than I was anticipating. I expect that to be a sad segment. And then some defensive coordinator updates. Spoiler alert, there might not be as many updates as you'd like. But Slade Nagel was hired as the Houston Cougar offensive coordinator. He spent the last season as the tight ends coach and special teams coordinator at LSU. In his career, he was also at LSU as a young guy, spent time at Texas State, Central Arkansas, and McNeese. And then ultimately got to Tulane in 2016 and worked his way there with Willie Fritz the same year, came in the same year there the whole time, tight ends coach, promoted to assistant head coach in 2022. We've since found out that with some older age stuff going on with the OC that year, he actually did a lot of the play calling for the majority of the year. That year became the offensive coordinator in 2023. And after Willie Fritz took the Houston job, Slade Nagel stayed on for the interim head coaching opportunity for about a week. And Fritz comes over to Houston. Slade Nagel stays at Tulane. And I think, thought was that Fritz wanted Slade Nagel to come over. Then Nagel declined. Then the Tulane Greenway went with a different head coaching option. Brought in his own offensive staff from Troy. Craddock did, and so then that meant that obviously Slade Nagel had to find somewhere to go. He's a Louisiana kid. He ends up at LSU. I've seen mixed reviews. Some Twitter accounts in LSU are upset that they let an offensive coordinator get out of their coach's office. They wanted some different offensive coordinators last year. I've also seen some LSU accounts that didn't know he was on their staff. So I've seen both ends of the spectrum as far as what LSU's response to this is. I do know that Willie Fritz would have taken Slade Nagel this time a year ago. And I think that that's important to keep in mind here. I think it makes sense that he didn't come initially. He was named the interim head coach, and I think it stands to reason. He thought he had a real chance, having been the assistant head coach and offensive coordinator recently, that he thought he had a real chance to get that head coaching job at Tulane and kind of keep building on that program. Ultimately, when he didn't and they went a different direction and a new offensive coordinator came in, he spent a year at LSU before ultimately reuniting with Willie Fritz. Now, that's not me reporting that that's why he stayed. That's me reading between lines and making what I think seem like educated guesses, but I'm open to being confirmed wrong there, I guess. As far as referencing the time he had a lot of say in what was happening at Tulane, it's inarguably the best 2-year stretch in Tulane football history. They've only had 5 10-win seasons in the entire history of Tulane football. One of them was Bobby Bowden's last year there in 1998. 2 of them happened in FDR's first term back in the 1930s. And the other 2 happened with Nagel and Willie Fritz working together. Now, I know that's in the American Athletic Conference, and things are a little different in the Big 12, but they've been playing football at Tulane since 1902. I feel like there's just statistically going to be a different year that had more success, or a different 2-year run that had more success. For what it's worth, those 2 years in the FDR term were actually separated by a 7-win year. So balances out a little bit. That's actually a better back-to-back year in 2022 and 2023. I look at Nagel, and Nagel brings in, his offense was described as a West Coast style offense in his year as the official offensive coordinator. They ran a spread run scheme in the year that he was calling a lot of the plays, but not officially the offensive coordinator, just the assistant head coach. And I look at him a guy that can do multiple things. Because of that, if you look at his time as a tight ends coach and other different roles he had at Tulane, they ran a bunch of different offenses. Guys kind of stopped through there on their way to other coaching ventures. Obviously, he developed guys like Tajay Spears, Michael Pratt. They've had great talent over there as well, and beat some really big teams. I mean, they beat USC. They nearly knocked off Ole Miss. They beat Houston with a third string quarterback. They've done some really impressive things over there together. And truthfully, I think had they brought Slade Nagel over as the offensive coordinator initially, we'd have all celebrated it as in this gigantic win, bringing a full staff together, guys that know each other, etc., all over. Obviously, that's a little bit dampened now with the defensive coordinator on the way out. Until a year later, he wasn't a coordinator and he wasn't an offensive coordinator last year, etc. But I think that perspective is important not to lose, right? Last year's offense was legitimately as bad as it could be. Just statistically speaking, rankings across the country speaking, it could not have been worse last year. And they're bringing in a guy that we all would have been much happier with going into last year. And I think that's a good thing. I think that people will want the more splashy name when this hire is, I guess, confirmed at some point on Thursday. It was leaked by a bunch of different guys. On3 had it first, I believe, on it over there, but so a bunch of different guys reporting it, and his name had been kind of coming up the more people you talk to. So I think it's safe to say this is going to happen sometime on Thursday formally, but it's all but formalized at this point. And whenever it's formalized, I think people will have comments about could have gotten this person, could have gotten that person. This coordinator wasn't even a coordinator. Da 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 da. And I think that's mostly because we've all gotten kind of taste of other options, looked out there and seen what's out there. Like full disclosure on this show, I've talked about how much I would have liked to see Brendan Marion in Houston. Marion's running the go-go offense out at UNLV. Looks like he is going to end up getting an offer to leave UNLV at a bunch of different places. They're going to be closer to 1.25 million, maybe. He's very coveted. Keep an eye on him with Oklahoma State if you're trying to follow the Brennan Marion train. But I think that people are constantly looking at what they missed out on and not realizing, truthfully, if we'd had Slade Nagel a year ago, we wouldn't be shopping for offensive coordinator right now. We wouldn't have even been looking for that. We've been looking for maybe a transfer quarterback in the portal or some offensive lineman or something. We wouldn't have even been thinking about OC. I don't think there's a chance that this offense looks like it did last year with Nagel as the OC either. As we look at Willie Fritz putting his staff together here, and he's got to do more putting together of it, I think, than he anticipated 72 hours ago. I do think it's probably comforting for him to have known throughout this week that he was getting a guy that he trusted back. And they got to Tulane together. I know that they had the 2 years where they're kind of at the top of the totem pole there, but Slade came in as a tight ends coach the same year that Willie Fritz came in. That's a long time on task together, right? A lot of building of a program together, right? And they're trying to do the same thing at Houston. And so I think that relationship and the time on task doing that together matters. And then I would also point out that I think part of the reason this took so long this week is they're figuring out financials. They know they got the guy they want. They know that they just have to beat, I think, as a tight end special teams coordinator, he was getting $525 a year next year at LSU. So they just have to find a way to beat that number, make it competitive with other Big 12 offensive coordinators, right? And then they suddenly thought that, oh, hey, and we're going to have this influx of money from the Dana Holgorsen thing happening. And then suddenly it's well, we have to spend some of that money probably to go get a new defensive coordinator because we can't retain our old. Those things are all cycling together. So the financials and those, I think that's probably based on reading between the lines, between a couple things you read out there and a couple things I read in my, I think that's probably what's slowing this down a little bit. Why it didn't happen Monday, right? It could have happened Monday. Position coach becoming a coordinator wouldn't have been the kind of thing LSU would have fought back on keeping or something. I don't think by any stretch. But if for what it's worth, Brian Kelly had at LSU, head football coach there, been at Notre Dame for a long time, had glowing things to say about Slade Nagel. And so I don't think that there's bad terms there. It isn't a Louisiana guy. as far as that connection, the Bayou Belt across the Gulf Coast there goes. But on the whole, I think it's a good hire. And again, try and remind everyone it's a hire you would have been really happy with a year ago. There's no reason to be less than that now because he took a year at a different job, right? And so we're going to talk more about the offense as guys fill out the roster, talk more about the offense as we get to spring practices and spring games and so on. But having Slade Nagel about to sign is really, really nice, but it's not quite the same as other guys signing that can play football as opposed to just coaching it. And Houston got a whole bunch of those on Wednesday, December 4th, National Signing Day. So I want to talk about those in a second. But before we get to all that, I do want to talk to them about our new buddies over at Better Together. You can download the app from either App Store, Google Play Store, wherever. And if you want to draft a season-long fantasy team, you can go do that. But Better Together is the first cooperative daily fantasy platform that offers you a chance to redo that fantasy draft that McCaffrey got hurt or whatever the case may be, right? Where teamwork triumphs and talent, you can play with your friends and Better Together, not against them. You just pick more or less on real-time player stats, then strategize with your partner or partners to boost your odds and climb the leaderboard together. So grab a friend and enjoy the social daily fantasy movement at Better Together. Better Together is the first cooperative daily fantasy application. Provides a sense of camaraderie and enhances the social experience of watching sports. Is a great way to stay connected with your friends that you can't watch sports together with in person. Put your group chats to the test and let you prove your team and knowledge is the best. Download Better Together now from the App Store. Sign up using promo code Locked On for a free $10 entry into any NCAA football or NFL contest. Play with me at Locked On NFL. Locked On CFB Saturday games this Saturday, Championship Saturday, with the code Locked On because winning alone is fun, but better together. Parker Ames with us a Locked On Coogs here, looking at an eventful Wednesday, December 4th. National Signing Day for the Houston Cougars. And I want to stress that going into this, I was nervous. Houston didn't have the offensive coordinator news very public yet. And frankly, on the inside stuff I was hearing, it's not a lot. There's people that get more, obviously, but it wasn't necessarily super out there. The defensive coordinator's debacle had happened over the last 48, 36 hours. And you're wondering how it's going to impact a bunch of, let's be honest, 18-year-old kids making decisions about if they want to come join your program or not. Texas Tech is an in-state program, and Shieldwood, and a great defense that Houston had last year, Shieldwood had just left for Tech, and you were like, what about all these great defensive linemen? The bulk of this class's talent, as far as number of players go, number of high-rated players go, is on the defense side of the ball. And so what does that say about this? I'm not saying they're not good offensive players. I shouldn't say that. I should put some stars in this class on the defense side of the ball, right? Houston had 20 signees on signing, 20 signees, not commits, 20 signees on National Signing Day Wednesday. Only lost out on one committed kid that ended up flipping at the last second and signing somewhere else to Mississippi State. For what it's worth, that's not Texas Tech. So while Shieldwood may have impacted not coming to Houston, it's not like he stole him and took him with him either. There's I should point out, another kid that was committed to Houston that has opted to give it some time to wait and think about it. They have a small window here and then another one in early part of 2025 they can sign in. And so he's going to take some more time to think about it, think it through. Probably wants to see who the hire is, totally understand that kind of a thing, right? But on the whole, you still got 20 signees in a great class. Depending on the analytic thing you look at, when you look at stars and rankings and so on, it could argue it's one of the best classes in Houston Cougar football history and modern recruiting, obviously, since we're doing these rankings and national things. Classes ranked number 48th overall in 24/7, 8th in the Big 12, 43rd overall in On3, 7th in the Big 12, and 49th overall in Rivals, 9th in the Big 12. So you kind of see that they're in that 40-ish range nationally and around the middle of the Big 12 as far as more conference located. And I got to say, for a Willie Fritz staff that did a lot of these signings, or signed all these guys, I guess, technically, without a coordinator, that's pretty strong, both on the kids' perspective, the program perspective, and I would also argue the position coaches and folks still on staff. I think that we forget that so many of these recruiting moments happen between people that maybe aren't a coordinator, but a quarterback coach, a quality control person, or just a recruiting personnel person that are all making these interactions, these relationships, and showing off what the Houston program can be with that recruit wearing red and white, right? And obviously Fritz staying on. If it's Fritz's second year, and they saw a little bit of what the culture was a year ago, it's a big, big deal. The class has 15 kids from the state of Texas in it. Also a big deal. Fritz made a big thing, a big statement since over and over again since he got hired that they were going to stay focused on recruits that they could drive to. The goal was to not fly. He mentioned at Big 12 Media Days before the season started that he had not flown for a recruit trip at that point. He's staying in Texas and Louisiana and only making car trips to these recruits' houses and things like that, when obviously all when it's legal. And that's showing up in the commitments and signees as well. I think as far as a position goes, I mentioned it earlier that the defensive line is one of the, whether it's Carmelo Brooks or DK Mays, and there's several defensive line prospects in this I think you're going to hear about as like sophomores and juniors making a lot of plays really early in their careers. Freshman linemen, it can be like a year to gain some size and get ready for the adjusted physicality because you've just been one of the best athletes in your high school or best athletes in your area, and now you're playing Division I football. But these guys are going to make impacts early on the defensive line. I think there's a number of them that will. Good DBs, good receivers, good running backs, good linebackers. Of course, I don't mean to say none of them are, but the single name star of the class, and not just because he's a quarterback, but because he truly is a star of the class, is Ridgepoint High School's Austin Carlisle at quarterback. He's, I guess, a high-end 3-star. If you look at like the number ranking, he's like as high as you can be to be a 3-star. But he is a 3-star quarterback. He's also listed at about 5'10", and I think that height's probably the only thing dinging him when you watch him. He's a true dual threat, like D1 track speed type of speed in the 100, 200. I think someone's pointed out he hit 23.7 miles per hour in a quarterback run just last season as far as his speed on the field. For reference, that's faster than Zion Chris was on the field against TCU and that big run he had there, right? Guy's got a great arm. Guy's got crazy stats. You can go look at a bunch of different box scores and stuff like that from his high school games. But guy just lit it up. I think the biggest thing about Austin Carlisle, though, is, well, two things. Biggest thing about him in the present tense is that he's the best quarterback, high school quarterback in the Houston area, and he chose Houston. The best quarterback in college football is Cam Ward. He's also from Houston. He didn't choose Houston 3 different times, right? You can go on a long list of guys that have not come to the University of Houston that were great high school quarterbacks in the Houston area, whether Vince Youngs or whomever, right? Austin Carlisle is the best high school quarterback in the class 2025, and he chose Houston. Next year's class, Keyshawn Henderson is the best athlete in the city of Houston, in the state of Texas. Some people have the number 1 athlete in the country. He plays quarterback as well. In the class 2026 in the city of Houston, he's committed to Houston at this point as well, right? And I think because Houston says he can play quarterback, he's actually they've got a pretty good inside track to him too. Other thing about Carlisle is that from a leadership perspective, Willie Fritz made the comment on Wednesday during a media availability that Carlisle's the kid that he's going to have come back and be a recruiter for the program once he's done playing, because he, as soon as he committed and ever since then, and on signing day, it has come play with me. Let's do this in Houston. Let's do this together. We mentioned a year ago with Mo Williams being a safety from Shadow Creek, doing the same kind of thing and really helping build up that class once Willie Fritz took over. Really important to kind of have those figureheads in each class, and it makes a big deal when it's a quarterback as well, obviously. Other big graphics getting put out on social media, Twitter, stuff like that, kind of like the sign day graphics on Wednesdays. You had, and what may actually be bigger for the immediate season, you had the announced return of a handful of key starters on defense. The program put together some graphics for Brandon Mack, Latrell McCutcheon, and Carlos Allen, who all tweeted out that they are returning to Houston next season instead of opting to, be done with school because they played there however many years, or to transfer out or try and go pro, whatever, that they all are going to use that eligibility to come back next year. And I think there's real, thought to, will these guys do that with Shieldwood leaving? Are they Fritz guys? Are they Wood guys? Are they transferring around, get me to the pros kind of guys? Having key players at, frankly, I guess technically each level of the defense. Brandon Mack played the dog position, which is kind of like a linebacker, kind of like a defensive end. Carlos Allen being an interior defensive lineman. LaShawn McCutcheon playing a DB. Kind of leaders on the field at each different area, saying that I want to come back and play. I don't even know who the defense coordinator is, but I'm going to play for that Fritz guy. I think it's really, really important for this program. And so, we'll see how many more people do that. We'll see how many people decide to go pro. We'll see how many people hit the transfer portal. We see how many people mull it out and wait it out and see who the coach is or who the defense coordinator is, right? I don't think there's a wrong answer for a kid trying to do what's best for them in that situation. I would advocate to play for Fritz. That's my 2 cents. But, it would just be interesting to see how many guys follow Carlos, Latrell, and Brandon's lead in that. Keeping a close eye on that, close eye on a lot of things. And, of course, we're also keeping a close eye on the defensive coordinator position, the open position at defense coordinator. But before we get to that, I want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and you can get ready to take on the NFL action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5, get $150 back in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So you get a hunch in the middle of a game. You can check out the latest stats, you live play-by-play, and so much more on the same place that you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $150 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. At FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Park Rangers Locked on Coogs host here, talking through a wild Wednesday, looking back at it that was, between the offensive coordinator news happening later in the day, later in my day anyway, my days are long, signing day, all the high school kids coming, not losing many, and the whole coordinator shuffle is a big deal. And then that whole coordinator shuffle, we mentioned at the top of the show that the offensive coordinator, Slade Nagel, is going to be the guy. People are still waiting now. Who's going to be the guy on defense? And I thought it was interesting in the same media availability where he mostly talked about recruiting, asked about it. I didn't ask, but people asked about to Willie Fritz, who the defense coordinator positions were looking at, like who was looking at it, who they were thinking, what they were thinking of, et cetera, what happened. People had questions about it. I think it's natural. It's big news the last 36 hours, or at that point, about 18 hours. And Fritz, to put it simply, looked pissed. And I understand it. But I think it's, for a guy that does such a great job of being professional, uses a lot of coach speech, and tries not to give too much emotion about things that upset him away out there. Willie Fritz was clearly upset about this. He was clearly, ticked off about the thought that, Shieldwood just dipped on him after a year in the Big 12. He brought him from Tulane with him. I don't think he had to do that. He has plenty of defense coordinator buddies across college football, from his time at Tulane before that. He's a defensive coach himself. And Shieldwood dipped on him for a conference opponent. And according to Willie Fritz in his media availability, it came down to financials. And he did say, you got to do what's right for your family, wishing him the best, etc. He just looked upset while doing it. And this makes me think that all of this week has been kind of crazy, right? You're finding financials, find the contract for offensive coordinators, right? Figuring out what's going to happen there. We know that they were in the running for, or talking to a couple different people. If we're in the reports through On3, and Duarte tweeted about it a little bit, but they had talked to other offensive coordinators that all probably command around because they've been on task as an offensive coordinator for a little bit longer than Slade Nagel had been. You might be looking at closer to $1 million, maybe even more, like I mentioned with Brennan Marion. Well, what's that going to do to your pocketbook? Well, then, all of a sudden, Texas Tech offers and Shea Wood says, "Hey, they're offering me this much money." It sounds like Fritz was like, "I don't know if we can find it. Give me a second." I don't know that he got that second. That part's me reading between the lines, but it does sound like this was a financial decision, and I don't know how much time Houston was given to respond to the financial decision that was about to be made, right? And so Willie Fritz left it at that. There hasn't been a whole lot of leaks. The big leak, obviously, was the offensive coordinator is going to be chosen. He said, I think we're picking one tomorrow, and then later that afternoon, it came out that it's going to be Slade Nagel. I maintain, I think that the three guys I'm looking at for this, Steve Helwig mentioned Brian Smith at Rice, so I should probably keep him as one of my three here. I Because of the timing of this, I think there's a real shot to talk to Chris Hampton. Chris Hampton's a co-defensive coordinator at Oregon, but he does not have the prestige of being he's like there's a defensive coordinator and a co-defensive coordinator on the sheet there. He's young. He was defensive coordinator at Tulane with Willie from 2021, 2022. He's been in this area with McNeese and Tulane and Central Arkansas and so on. And Oregon's number one team in America. They're playing the Big Ten championship game this weekend, so you probably need to let him, uh, coach this week. But I think Sunday, Monday, especially if they win that game, they're going into a bye for the college football playoff. They got some time to kind of reconfigure. You can make a call there. I was super shocked to see that Chris Hampton's only making $800,000 a year. I say only. It's obviously a lot of money to a teacher, coach, and podcaster like myself, but that's very attainable. Shea Wood, before he left, was making $750,000. Right, 50,000 more. You get the guy from Oregon. I think we can find a way to get a little bit over that, and maybe make it worth his while. Obviously, at Oregon, he's also going to be making bonuses for how good a year they're having. But Oregon's not actually a defensive studded team. Oregon has been killing it in recruiting, and Houston does not necessarily have Phil Knight NIL money, but some of those relationships, you got to think Chris Hampton could work with him as well as he came to work with Fritz once again. And then internally, I think that it's not a crazy thought that you could settle on this thing being a Zach Etheridge project. Etheridge was an associate head coach and secondary coach at Auburn. He's coached at Houston before. This is technically his second stint at Houston, was here in 2019-20. He's young, up and coming, but I would also point out that he and Joshua Christian Young have a great relationship and do a great job with the DBs together. And so while Etheridge could take a defensive coordinator role, you kind of also elevate JCY. JCY is another young, up-and-coming name another up-and-coming name, I should say, in this industry. I actually don't know how old he is. And I say all that to say that I think that's still where I'm at now. There's all kinds of other coordinator guys out there. But it's very much, we didn't see this coming when you ask people, right? And so they're still kind of scrambling to figure out what to do, what the first move is. Obviously, as moves get made, we'll be following them each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. So hit subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we're live for big news. Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about the Houston Cougars, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.